Welcome to Marketplace Tech Bytes, our weekly review of the biggest stories making headlines across the industry. I'm Lily Jamali. On this week's show, we discuss the prospect of a Surgeon General's warning for social media. The big tech company regulators say is too hard to quit. And we explore how OpenAI is becoming less open. Joining me to discuss all of that is Paresh Dave. He is senior writer at Wired Magazine. Hey, Paresh.
How are you, Lily?
Doing well on what looks to be a pretty gloomy day where you are in San Francisco.
It is. It is typical summer here.
All right. Well, so glad to have you back. And we're going to start, as we always do, with our Byte of the Week. This is a number that gives us a little bit of insight into the week that was in tech. What have you been thinking about this week?
The number I've got for you is 18. That's the number of states that have media literacy laws on their books, directing schools to provide things like internet safety education, according to the Media Literacy Now, a group that's been advocating for these sorts of laws. And I really wanted to find out how much the federal government has actually been directing towards things like anti-cyberbullying protection programs. And I think it's telling that it's really hard to find that number because Congress hasn't really done anything comprehensive on that, which I think fits into what we're about to discuss.
It does. So does my number, which is 5. That's the number of days since I turned my iPhone over to grayscale. I don't know if you've ever tried this, but they say it helps reduce your screen time. And the Surgeon General warning that we're going to be talking about, this story, got me thinking about that. We did a segment on this grayscale option a few months back. I finally did it, and I'm eager to see my screen time when the weekend rolls around, which I usually am not so eager to see.
I'm not a fan of black and white movies, so I probably wouldn't enjoy looking at my phone in grayscale either.
I can't say I enjoy it. I think that's the whole point. It does actually, remind me, I'm on my phone right now. So it's kind of been an interesting psychological experiment. But let's talk about the U.S. Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy, who is urging Congress now to require warning labels for social media platforms. Let's start with just how this would work, this Surgeon General's warning label.
So it would basically add a piece of text maybe to the top of social media platforms, similar to the ones that you already see on cigarette packs or bottles of alcohol. And it requires Congress to get involved to, approve doing that and requiring these companies to add that label onto their products. But this adding it to a digital forum is kind of different.
It is. Is it your sense, based on what you've read, that a label like this could make a difference?
Yeah, I mean, it seems to work in the sense that people do notice them. There was one study that showed people tended to hide the fact that they smoke cigarettes a little bit more because they, knew that it was bad, and people would perceive them differently in part because of that label. One of the studies that I saw also mentioned that, the more graphic, the less text and the more visual and graphic that warning is matters. And, we've seen those commercials where they show the lungs filled with, all the tobacco and everything that smoking does to you. I don't know how you show things like youth mental health harm, a brain that's slightly warped. I don't think we want to be showing suicide. So how do you show stress? And I'm not sure how one does that, but yeah.
Right. And for parents, the Surgeon General writes in the New York Times, he had an opinion piece this week, that when asked if a warning from the Surgeon General would prompt them to limit or monitor their children's social media use, 76% of people in one recent survey of Latino parents said yes, it would. Here's what I find interesting about this proposal, and I'd love your reaction to this. You hear social media companies say often there's no clear scientific evidence that social media is causing mental health problems for youth. Dr. Murthy is saying, fine, but you haven't proven that it is safe.
I think it's an interesting argument, but just because something isn't safe doesn't mean that they should be required to, tell the world that it hasn't been proven safe. I mean, right now with dietary supplements, right? I mean, it remains unregulated. There's all kinds of things that are probably unsafe that continue to be sold. I mean, guns in many ways might not be safe, but they continue to be sold. They don't have that same warning label. What I think is valiant about what Dr. Murthy is trying to do here is kickstart a conversation. And we're seeing something similar happen right now in the LA Unified School District in Los Angeles, where they've just moved to ban phones during the school day, phones and social media. Probably very difficult to enforce, but one thing that I took from sort of this conversation is these LAUSD officials sort of went into schools and didn't realize how bad the problem had become with sort of kids and student addiction to phones. And then they realized there's all these things that they could maybe do with Chromebooks, which are supposed to be the laptops that students do use during the day rather than their phones, that there was a lot of things they could do to work with Google, which makes those, to improve them. And end that reliance on phones. So it's become sort of a springboard for conversation, and maybe the Surgeon General's point here will do the same.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought up what's happening right now in my neck of the woods here in Los Angeles. It's going to be an interesting set of developments to watch. And we have posted a link to the Surgeon General's opinion piece in the New York Times, which we referenced. That's going to be on our website, marketplacetech.org. U.S. regulators are suing Adobe, saying the company made it hard for users to end their subscriptions. This is our second story of the week. They are also accused of hiding details, Adobe officials are, on an expensive cancellation fee for consumers. I read this story and immediately thought of this scene from the show Friends, where Chandler, played by the late Matthew Perry, explains why he cannot quit his gym.
You think I like having $50 taken out of my bank account every month? No, they make you go all the way down there. Then they use all these phrases and peppiness to try to confuse you. And then they bring out Maria.
Who is Maria?
Oh, Maria.
I know we just recently lost Matthew Perry, but my gosh, did he make us laugh, and we will celebrate that. Paresh, this action being brought by the Federal Trade Commission, headed by Lina Khan, it looks remarkably similar to the commission suit against Amazon filed over the fall, back in the fall, I think it was September. Talk to me a little bit about, what the similarities are there as you see them.
I think the issue is really that customers of these services need to be able to cancel easily. They need to understand upfront what they are paying for. So in the Adobe case, the issue is really that they were being tied into these long-term contracts where they paid monthly. If you remember, it's sort of, cell phones bills used to be like this at some point, where if you tried to cancel that contract early, you'd sort of have to pay a 50% early termination fee. And for some of these Adobe products, I mean, that's thousands of dollars potentially that someone would have to pay if they wanted to cancel after a couple of months, if they had signed up for one of these long-term contracts. And this is a problem across the internet. I mean, the crazy one I learned recently because of a viral social media post, like the New York Times charges you every 28 days, which adds up being 13 times over a year, even though you think it's sort of a monthly subscription.
I'd missed that.
And then the other thing the FTC has really been concerned about is how difficult it is to cancel. So Adobe, you would sort of maybe try to fill out this online form or talk to a customer service rep, and you'd sort of get pushed in a phone tree and never actually be able to cancel, was a lot of the complaints the FTC was fielding and the Better Business Bureau was fielding on this. And so the FTC is really adamant that it should be easy to cancel things that you sign up for, similar to the Amazon case.
Right. In the Amazon case, it was about Prime memberships. The FTC is flagging this, what they call a problem, and is also pushing a proposed solution. If you can talk about that briefly, this click to cancel policy that they're floating. And quickly, I'll just mention Adobe's response. In their telling of things, they have what they call a simple cancellation process. So you're hearing a very different story there. And they are planning, of course, to refute the claims in court.
Yeah, I mean, you click to subscribe. Why can't you click to cancel? And yet there are still many services out there where you're required to call, potentially even write in, like by snail mail in some cases, to cancel these things that you sign up for. And I think the FTC and Lina Khan have basically said, canceling should be as easy as signing up, and you know how quick these companies are to get their hands on your credit card details from their
Right.
websites or
Right.
apps.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for the great insights there. On to our third and final story. We could do, Paresh, an entire week in review show just on Sam Altman and ChatGPT and OpenAI, but we won't. So here are some very quick headlines before we get to your really great enterprise reporting on the company, on the nonprofits that are sort of in the company's constellation. First off, Ilya Sutskever, the chief scientist at OpenAI, who helped oust Sam Altman over Thanksgiving until Altman came back. Sutskever then left. He is starting his own company to rival OpenAI now. That announcement coming on Wednesday. And then Sam Altman reportedly shared with some investors that he's considering changing OpenAI to be a for-profit enterprise, no longer controlled by a nonprofit board. Presh, quick thoughts on any of the above.
Well, I think one of the questions with Ilya's new company is who's backing it. They haven't really said much about the funding and the structure of the company. So I think that's one question there. On Sam and sort of changing the structure of OpenAI, it's something that we've also, the information reported last week and something we've heard rumblings about at Wired as well, that, basically OpenAI wants to go public someday, and you can't really take a nonprofit public. So how do you create a structure where there's still some oversight from this nonprofit board that is supposed to guard OpenAI's mission to develop sort of beneficial artificial general intelligence while remaining sort of a for-profit entity that can go public. And so the idea is like maintain maybe a nonprofit and then have a separate for-profit, but like a public benefit corporation, which is this very interesting new structure that a lot of experts don't think really adds much, but at least on paper, companies can sort of try to pursue good without being sued by their shareholders for not always prioritizing shareholder interests.
Right. And you have been reporting in Wired that nonprofits backed by OpenAI made transparency pledges, and now they're wanting to be a little bit less transparent?
Yeah, so OpenAI has funded a couple of nonprofits that Sam has sort of at least been formally involved in one and loosely involved in another. One of them is funded over the past few years the study on guaranteed basic income or providing cash grants to people in a couple of states in the U.S. And we're expecting results from that study later this year. But yeah, they said that they would share things like their governance documents, their conflict of interest policy, their financial statements over the past few years. But then when we asked for it this year, they said, no, we don't really do that. And what we said in the past was kind of wrong, but not really wrong. And this other nonprofit, which funds other nonprofits called UBI Charitable, also backed by money from OpenAI, also said, they won't even say who's involved with this this group. Really, an email I got from them offering comment for my story was from an unsigned email account, UBI admin, and they stopped responding to my questions.
Very interesting. Well, with so much focus on AI proper, really interesting to see you poking around on these related entities. I'm glad you're doing that important work. Paresh Dave of Wired Magazine, thank you so much as always for being here.
Thanks, Lily.
And thanks to all of you for watching Marketplace Tech Bytes Week in Review. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to us if you haven't already. We are at Marketplace APM on YouTube. Rosie Hughes produced this week's episode, and I'm Lily Jamali. This is APM.